Faith, a confident belief in the truth, value, or trustworthiness of a person, idea, or thing. Guilty as charged. You caught me in the act of reading the dictionary again, just like old Fillmore. But I'm not Millard Fillmore, okay? I'm Mr. Beat, and I like books and movies and TV shows and podcasts.
You know anything about podcasts? I've been getting into podcasts.
That's great. I love podcasts.
I've even watched movies and shows about books and podcasts, and read books and listened to podcasts about movies and shows. Anyway, what about American presidents? Well, in this video, we are going to look at the favorite books, movies, and TV shows, but not podcasts, of every president in American history. Okay, well, the first full-length feature film didn't come out until 1906. At the time, Theodore Roosevelt was president. The first radio show, 1920, when Woodrow Wilson was president.
Wilson?
And the first TV show didn't come out until 1928, when Calvin Coolidge was president. Actually, that's earlier than I thought. So what I am trying to say is that it would be impossible for many presidents to have favorite films and TV shows because films and TV shows didn't yet exist. Kind of like how none of us have a favorite time bender experience because, you know, time bender experiences don't happen yet. Also, to be perfectly upfront about this, we don't know exactly the favorite books, movies, or TV shows of every single American president, so this video is over. I mean, hold on. We can still do this. If we don't have a specific title, I'll bring up their favorite types of books, films, and/or shows. Before we get into it, this video is sponsored in part by BetterHelp. Therapy has changed my family's life in ways I couldn't have previously imagined. There's a common misconception out there that asking for help, especially when it comes to our mental health, is a sign of weakness. But from my own journey, I've learned that it's quite the opposite. In fact, it may be the bravest thing you can do. Therapy, especially with a platform like BetterHelp, offers a unique third-party perspective to the challenges we face in our relationships. BetterHelp connects with a licensed therapist who provides unbiased, professional insights in your situation. It makes the process of finding the right therapist incredibly easy. With over 30,000 licensed therapists, you're matched based on your individual needs, ensuring you find someone you can connect with. The platform is flexible, offering sessions via messaging, video, or phone calls, whatever you're most comfortable with. And if for any reason you feel your therapist isn't your perfect match, you can switch at no additional cost. BetterHelp is here to support you on the journey of taking control of your life and making a change for the better. Use my link, betterhelp.com/MrBeat, and you'll get 10% off of your first month. Let BetterHelp offer you the unbiased professional insights that can truly make a difference. Okay, so here's the favorite media of every president in American history. Specifically, books, movies, and shows. George Washington. Washington's favorite movie was The Patriot. Oh, hold up. Movies weren't invented yet. I'm already messing this up. Washington's favorite book was likely Cato by Joseph Addison. It's actually a play that tells the story of a real-life Roman politician named Cato the Younger who failed to prevent Julius Caesar from becoming a dictator. That actually makes a lot of sense if you know what Washington was all about. Republicanism, FTW. John Adams. It's difficult to just pick one book that Adams loved. He read a lot and owned thousands of books. In fact, it's easier to pick out a book that he hated, judging by all the nasty notes he wrote about it. Adams didn't so much like Mary Wollstonecraft's Origin and Progress of the French Revolution. We do know that Adams was a fan of Paradise Lost by John Milton. Thomas Jefferson. just like his good friend slash sworn enemy slash good friend John Adams. Jefferson loved reading and also owned thousands of books. Probably his favorite book was Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. He owned several editions of it and even read it in its original language to learn Spanish. Muy bueno. James Madison. Madison liked non-fiction. Often he was writing more than he was reading, and it was pretty much all political stuff. I could say his favorite book was The Federalist Papers, but that'd be weird since he wrote many of the Federalist Papers. I mean, he wrote the freaking Constitution, for goodness sake. We do know the philosopher John Locke had a huge influence on Madison. For this reason, pretty much any book by John Locke was his favorite book. James Monroe. Monroe didn't read that much compared to previous presidents, but there is some evidence he enjoyed the long poem The Pleasures of the Imagination by Mark Akenside. John Quincy Adams. JQ was also a huge fan of poetry since he translated Christoph Martin Wieland's poem Oberon from German to English. It's obvious he was a big fan of it, but Adams also loved the Aeneid by Virgil and read it in Latin, of course. But you know who definitely didn't know how to read Latin? Andrew Jackson. Yeah, Jackson didn't read that much. According to the historian Robert Ramini, the only non-religious book that Jackson read from beginning to the end was The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. Martin Van Buren. Similar to James Madison, Van Buren didn't read much fiction and mostly read law books. Look, we don't know Martin Van Buren's favorite book. That rhymed. But that hasn't stopped some online to speculate that his favorite book was his own autobiography. If this is true, then I guess he was quite full of himself. William Henry Harrison. Yep, same with Harrison. We don't know his favorite book, but he also read law books. Yay. John Tyler. Tyler loved William Shakespeare, one of the greatest writers in world history. Tyler grew up reading Shakespeare and could easily quote many of his plays. He often referenced Shakespeare's plays in his speeches. Tyler also apparently was a big fan of Adam Smith's classic book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, aka The Wealth of Nations? Why the heck did I read the whole title? James Polk. Yeah, we have no idea. Sure, he read law books and case briefs extensively, but come on. Buddy, I'm trying to make an engaging video here, and you're not helping. Zachary Taylor. Taylor also didn't read much. When he did read, though, he loved to read about history. Cool beans. One book he dug was David Hume's The History of England. Millard Fillmore. Well, we do know that Fillmore carried a dictionary with him at all times as he grew up. Seriously, he'd study the dictionary to learn as much as possible in between mundane tasks. So it seems I'm not the only dictionary boy after all. Ha! Franklin Pierce. There is no evidence that Pierce read much for fun, and while we don't know his favorite book, it's safe to say he probably enjoyed the books of his good friend Nathaniel Hawthorne. And you know what book Pierce likely enjoyed more than The Scarlet Letter or The House of the Seven Gables? Life of Franklin Pierce, of course. Hawthorne made him look pretty good in that book, after all, and it likely helped Pierce get elected president. James Buchanan. He likely just read law books and documents. Boring. Okay, I likely would have found what he read interesting, but not most people. Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln famously read a lot. First of all, he loved the Bible. Despite not being particularly religious, he read it multiple times. He also dug Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe and The Arabian Nights, a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales, the most famous one today being about Aladdin and his oil lamp with a magical genie inside of it. Lincoln loved poetry. Like John Tyler, he was also a big fan of William Shakespeare's plays. In particular, he loved loved Macbeth, Hamlet, and Richard III. He also loved watching plays, as you probably already know, since that's what he was doing when, you know, he got shot in the head. Andrew Johnson. Johnson wasn't able to read until he was basically an adult, but he did love to read after that. The first book he owned was a collection of speeches by John Frost called The American Speaker. It was probably his favorite book, though, because the historian Annette Gordon Reed says he kept the book his whole life and constantly got it out for inspiration. Ulysses Grant. While we don't know what Grant's favorite book was, his favorite author was Edward Bulwer Lytton, the dude who came up with the famous, now cliche beginning to stories, "It was a dark and stormy night." Grant once said he had read all his books. Rutherford Hayes. Hayes was another big reader, and his tastes seemed to be all over the place. It's likely that his favorite book was a book of speeches by the legendary U.S. Senator Daniel Webster. Hayes would read Webster's speeches so much that he memorized some of them. James Garfield, another well-read dude. Garfield liked all kinds of books. He read poetry, history books, and pretty much anything by Charles Dickens and Sir Walter Scott. Perhaps his favorite book, however, was the aforementioned Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. As a kid, he had only read the Bible and some school books, so when he first borrowed a copy of Robinson Crusoe, it opened up a whole new world to him, baby. And guess who also was a fan of Dickens? No, not me. I always found it difficult to read his stuff. Too many words, okay? But no, guess who also was a fan of Dickens? Chester Arthur. It's true, while we don't know Arthur's favorite book, we do know he dug Dickens and also William Makepeace Thackeray. What a name that is. How do we know he liked Dickens and Thackeray? Well, like a dork, he often quoted both. Grover Cleveland. Talk about dorky. Cleveland's favorite book was, a law book. Commentaries on the Laws of England by William Blackstone. Apparently, Cleveland would hype up the book to anyone who expressed even the slightest interest in law to him. Benjamin Harrison. Growing up, Harrison read a bunch of biographies and history books, but likely his favorite two books were Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe and Kenilworth. William McKinley. McKinley was all about poetry. We don't know his favorite book, but there is evidence he dug the poetry of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, John Greenleaf Whittier, and George Gordon Byron, and other poets that went by three names. I'm just sure of it. Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt also loved to read, loving a wide variety of books, but especially military history books. You're not surprised, are you? His favorite book just may have been Influence of Sea Power Upon History by Alfred Thayer Mahan. William Howard Taft. Taft was another president who just liked the law. Political books, basically. And even though full-length feature films were a thing by this time, he apparently, wasn't that into them. The next president did watch films, though. In fact, he screened a controversial one at the White House. Woodrow Wilson. Wilson infamously screened The Birth of a Nation at the White House on February 18th, 1915. Despite being incredibly racist toward African Americans, The Birth of a Nation was basically the first blockbuster Hollywood film in American history. Quote, "It is like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it is all so terribly true," Wilson supposedly said after watching it. Yeah, later Wilson and even some historians denied that he said that. What about books? Well, Wilson had lots of favorite books as he read quite a bit, but his favorite was likely Walter Bagehot's The English Constitution, although he was a fan of pretty much all of Bagehot's books. Warren Harding. Harding didn't have a favorite book, but he seemed to get into poetry and Shakespeare. He probably didn't see that many films before he died, but supposedly his favorite movie was The Covered Wagon. How do we know that? Well, he screened it at the White House on April 24th, 1923. Harding was the first president to be heard on the radio. His voice first broadcast on June 14th, 1922. Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge was a big fan of the legendary Roman stud muffin Cicero, so you could say his favorite book was The Complete Works of Cicero. According to the historian Robert Sobel, he read so much Cicero that he became fluent in Latin. How about his favorite movie? Well, we don't know. Although Coolidge was fascinated by Hollywood. Herbert Hoover. According to the historian William Leuchtenberg, Hoover's favorite book was David Copperfield by the aforementioned Charles Dickens. We don't know Hoover's favorite film, although he also was fascinated by Hollywood films. Before he was president, Hoover was in the first TV broadcast in American history on April 7th, 1927. Franklin Roosevelt. FDR loved movies so much that he built a theater in the White House to regularly watch them. He even directly worked with Hollywood and starred in a bunch of short films. His favorite movies included I'm No Angel and Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. More than anything, though, he loved to watch Mickey Mouse cartoons. He also loved to read. His favorite book was probably The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, although he also loved reading Kipling's poetry. Not only was FDR on the radio a lot, but he listened to the radio a lot. He loved to listen to anything featuring the comedians Abbott and Costello. Harry Truman. Truman was the first president to regularly watch TV while in office. His favorite show was likely Meet the Press. Yes, that Meet the Press. It's still on. It's the longest running TV show in American history, as a matter of fact. First debuting on November 6th, 1947. Truman loved Westerns, a genre of films usually set in the American frontier in the second half of the 1800s. His favorite Western, though, was My Darling Clementine. Truman loved to read a lot, more than most presidents. One time, a journalist asked him if he liked to read himself to sleep each night. Truman replied, quote, "No, young man, I like to read myself awake." His favorite book was likely Charles Francis Horne's Great Men and Famous Women. What a title that is! Dwight Eisenhower. Besides the Bible, Eisenhower's favorite book, at least according to the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, is A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by the legendary Mark Twain himself. Eisenhower also loved Westerns. If it had a cowboy in it, he would probably watch it. He loved the Western radio/TV show Gunsmoke and the Western TV show Bonanza. Ike watched more than 200 movies in the White House as president. Pretty much all of them, yep, Westerns. His favorite movie was High Noon. His favorite TV show, though, wasn't a Western. It was a sitcom, The Phil Silvers Show. John F. Kennedy. Kennedy had a wide range of tastes in both literature and film. Some of his favorite movies included The Longest Day, Casablanca, Spartacus, Sands of Iwo Jima, and Bad Day at Black Rock. On television, he regularly tuned into Maverick, The Judy Garland Show, and The Jack Benny Program. More than anything, though, JFK loved Bond. James Bond.
James Bond.
He read Ian Fleming's James Bond books and loved pretty much every Bond film or show that came out. His favorite film and book likely was From Russia with Love. In fact, it was one of the last films Kennedy ever saw. He watched a private screening of it at the White House about a month before he was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson. Johnson also liked westerns, both on the big screen and small screen. His favorite movie was probably The Searchers. That said, he also was really into Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, a groundbreaking film about an interracial couple. One book that likely had a big influence on LBJ's life was The Other America by Michael Harrington. Richard Nixon. Nixon loved Patton. No, not that Patton. No, not that Patton, but a movie about that Patton named Patton. Nixon watched the movie multiple times and told seemingly everyone he knew to watch it. That said, Nixon also loved musicals like Hello, Dolly and Yankee Doodle Dandy. On television, he loved Gilligan's Island and Kojak. Old Tricky Dick also read a lot, but I couldn't find just one book that was his favorite. He did love reading books by the Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy, which, to be honest, I didn't see coming. And I didn't see this next one coming either. Gerald Ford. Ford's favorite movie was Home Alone.
You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
I'm not joking. That just so happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies as well. I've probably seen it over 100 times. Otherwise, Ford wasn't into films that much. He did regularly watch TV. His favorite show was Moving On. Ford's favorite book was pretty much any novel by Horatio Alger. Jimmy Carter. Other than the Bible, Carter's favorite book is Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, a book that documented poor farmers during the Great Depression, written by James Agee and featuring photos by Walker Evans. His favorite film is Gone with the Wind. That said, Carter has always been a huge movie fan. During his 4 years as president, he had 480 film screenings at the White House. So what about TV shows? He's more of a news and documentaries type of fellow. His favorite show is PBS's NewsHour. Ronald Reagan. Well, first of all, what's different about Ronald Reagan is that he was actually in a bunch of movies. So, in addition to the films he was in, he liked The Sound of Music, Top Gun, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and It's a Wonderful Life. His favorite TV show was the sitcom Family Ties, which just so happened to feature a character who was a big fan of Reagan. While we don't know Reagan's favorite book, he quite publicly praised Tom Clancy's novel, The Hunt for Red October. Hey, speaking of The Hunt for Red October, George H.W. Bush. Bush Sr. also loved The Hunt for Red October. Well, he loved the movie that was based on the novel. At least, Bush also enjoyed The Longest Day. I mentioned that one earlier, as it was also one of JFK's favorite films. It's a movie about the Allied invasion of Normandy during World War II. Both Bush and JFK were naval heroes during that war. According to the historian Kurt Smith, his favorite TV show was Murder, She Wrote. Bush Sr. was a big fan of political and history books, but his favorite was probably War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. However, he also once said that The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger really inspired him. Bill Clinton. Well, shoot, we know exactly what Bill Clinton's favorite books are because he published a list of his 21 favorite books. And there they are. Look at them. So, yeah. Did you read all that yet? Okay, maybe you could just pause the video because I'm moving on. Now, of those 21 books, the one he has consistently praised in interviews is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So I'm going with that book as his favorite. Clinton has also always really been into movies. Like Eisenhower, his favorite movie is High Noon, screening it around 20 times at the White House while he was president. He also digs Casablanca, like JFK, Schindler's List, and an obscure German film called The Harmonious. And yep, Clinton loves some good television as well. His favorite TV shows include Boston Legal, Blind Spot, Strike Back, and, wait for it, Grey's Anatomy. George W. Bush. Bush Jr.'s favorite TV show of all time is A&E's biography series? Okay, apparently Bush is also really into science fiction shows and movies, although his favorite movies are either baseball-related, like Field of Dreams, or war-related, like Black Hawk Down, We Were Soldiers, and Saving Private Ryan. Bush likes a wide range of types of books, but his favorite book is the Bible. Barack Obama. Similar to Bill Clinton, Obama has made it quite public what his favorite books are. Ah yes, there's a sample. But every time he has published his favorite books, two books consistently show up. Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson and Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Obama also loves a bunch of movies, but his favorites include The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, Lawrence of Arabia, and just like John F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton, Casablanca. Obama's favorite TV show is MASH, but he was also so impressed with The Wire that he invited one of the creators of the show, David Simon, to speak with him at the White House. Say what you will about Obama, but I think the man has great taste in TV shows. After all, my favorite show of all time is The Wire. That's right, I bought the box set of DVDs back in the day. Don't judge me now. Donald Trump. Trump famously loves watching political shows, particularly on Fox News. He also loves Saturday Night Live and has even made several appearances on the show. And of course, don't forget that Trump himself became a household name after the success of his reality TV show, The Apprentice. Fewer folks know that his favorite film of all time is often viewed as one of the greatest, if not the greatest films of all time, Citizen Kane. Other films Trump loves includes Goodfellas, Gone with the Wind, hey, like Jimmy Carter, Bloodsport, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and, like Obama, The Godfather. Yeah, but does Trump read? Joe Biden. The current president's favorite book is apparently Ulysses by James Joyce. Biden's favorite film is the sports drama Chariots of Fire. So what about shows? Well, in the past, Biden has shared that he enjoys Modern Family and Parks and Recreation, which, oh, would you look at that? But apparently, lately, Biden's favorite show has been Morning Joe. Wait, Joe likes Joe? Joe way. The dad jokes write themselves. So that was every president's favorite book, movie, and/or show. Now you must go to your local library and consume them all. But if you don't have enough time to do that, you can just read the dictionary instead, like I do. I have the 1976 American Heritage Edition. I'm always 48 years behind, after all. Faith cure. A cure of an ailment held to be accomplished through religious faith. You're still here? Well, go on, go on. Well, wait, hold on. Watch the last few seconds of this video first, if you don't mind. So which book, movie, or show surprised you the most? What type of president's video should I make next? Let me know down below. Oh, you're already doing that. Oh my goodness, that is highly inappropriate. No, I will not make that video. Does your mother know that you type comments like that underneath YouTube videos? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You need to keep it clean down there, okay? You're gonna get me into trouble. Keep it clean.